All right, if we've selected girder as our midspan support, the next section is going to be how we calculate how much lumber we need to make the girder and also what lumber we need to support the girder. So the first thing is we got to choose is what are we making this girder out of. So if we click this drop down, we can select 2x material, LVLs, or some other dimensional lumber. So let's say we want to make our beam or girder, I use those terms interchangeably, out of 2x10 LVLs. We move down to the next section is going to be the number of members in our girder. Now, this is going to be how many of these 2x10 LVLs are we going to be fastening together. So, for example, if this was our beam or girder, this would be 3 members in our girder. 1, 2, 3, right? It's not the total number of lumber we're going to use to make this girder. That's what we're trying to calculate, but just how many members are we going to be fastening together? Basically, how thick will this beam or girder be? So this would be 1, 2, 3 members in our girder. For example, this photo, you can see there's just 2 of this 2x material fastened together, so that would be 2 members in our girder. So let's just say we're using 3 members in our girder. The next section we're going to go to is our girder post dimension. Now our girder post dimension is going to be what are we using to support our girder, right? Since it's not a wall, we're going to know we're going to have posts supporting this girder, right? So that can either be a lolly column or 4x4 or 6x6 wooden posts that we can use to support the girder. So we'll go through both lolly columns and lumber, but we'll start with lumber. So let's say we use 6x6 pressure treated wood for our posts. The next thing we're going to do is our girder post height. So this is going to be how tall are these posts going to be. Now these don't have to be completely accurate. We're just using this to estimate how much lumber we'll need. So you can kind of just use a good estimate for how tall these will be. So if it's a crawl space, let's say the total crawl space is going to be 3 feet tall. Let's say each one of these posts will be about 2.5 feet tall. So let's just put 2 feet 6 inches. And the next section we're going to put is the number of posts in the field. Now that's going to mean, by field, I am referring to how many, if these, let's say this is some drawings we have for a floor plan. This is going to be the number of posts that aren't at the ends of our beam or girder, right? They're going to be the ones that are in the field, right? So if we had a post here, 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 and here, our posts in the field would just be 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is important because this is going to be used to calculate the length between posts. So if you know how many posts you're going to have in the field, you can put that in. But if you want to figure out how many you need, you can type in different numbers. And that will basically tell you what the distance is between each of these posts. So you can kind of figure out how many of these posts you need, right? So let's say we don't like an 8-foot span, but we're comfortable with a 6.5-foot span. We can choose 5 posts in the field. Now the number of posts at the end of the girder means right here. Are we going to have any posts supporting the ends of the girder? Now, a lot of times girder or beams will be sitting in a masonry pocket, so they'll be resting on top of the foundation, not a post. So if that's your case, then you just put 0 or leave it blank. But if you are having posts right here that are using to hold up the ends of the girder, just put how many posts there will be, which most likely would be 2, right? So this will calculate, if we scroll over here, how many posts we need, right? So we're going to have, this is telling us we're going to need 2 6x6x10 pressure treated posts, and we'll be able to get all of our 7 posts out of that material. This will optimize for the least amount of waste. So for example, if this were, let's say, a 3-foot post, that'll change to 6x6x12, right? Now our girder lengths are going to be calculated, right? And this is very cool. So that our girder will always, the lengths of this material will always will span over one post and land on the other, right? So I'll show you how cool this is. So if we were to select 6 posts, right? That means there's going to be 5.5 feet in between each post, right? So if we had a 16-foot LVL, right, it wouldn't really do us much good because that 16 feet wouldn't be resting on a post. But our 12-foot would, right, because we're spanning 5.5 feet and then 11 feet final. So we only need a 2 by 12. We only need a 12-foot LVL to land on our posts. So that's that. Now, if we were choosing lolly columns, right? Now, lolly columns are going to be these things right here. Once again, it will tell us how many lolly columns we need, right? And that was based on, right? This is saying we only need 4 lolly columns, even though we have 8 posts. And that's because we can cut these posts down because these are 8-foot lolly columns usually come in 8 feet, and so you can cut down your lolly columns, your 8-foot lolly columns. So, but if this were, let's say, 6-foot tall posts, let's say we're having this is a basement, right? Just like this, and so these lolly columns will be, let's call it 7 feet. Then we're going to have 8 lolly columns right here, and that's it.